Hello, Brubs. We're back with A Mother in History. Marguerite, Oswald, the mother of the man who killed Kennedy, by Jean Stafford, 1966 book. And we move to section 2. As I've stated before, I'm trying not to break the spine, so that's why I'm holding the book curiously. Section 2. Having taken Mrs. Oswald at her word, I refused the offer of a lesson in manipulation when the man delivered the tape recorders to my hotel. This was unwise. Despite her boast that she could work them all, Mrs. Oswald couldn't work these. And I had never clapped eyes on a tape recorder before in my life. After a quarter of an hour of bungling experimentation, plugging and unplugging, punching buttons, and shifting levers, reversing bobbins, profitlessly studying instructions that might as well have been in Arabic, and probably were, we were both exasperated, sitting on the floor with our hair awry amid furniture that we had dislodged in our futile fiddling. We were exasperated with the contraptions and with each other. Mrs. Oswald said with some asperity that these were inferior machines, that I should not have cut corners when matters of such importance were at stake. I felt as defensive as if the machines belonged to me. I wanted to invent an affidavit from Consumer Reports to fling before her, but having chosen to do so, I should have learned how to run the trashy thingamabobs. She went to the bedroom to telephone the shop to ask for help, and while she was gone, Lady Luck visited me in a dazzling revelation and piloted my fingers in a virtuoso performance unique in my experience, so that when she came back with the disgruntling news that since it was Saturday, the shop was closed, I was delighted to point to the smoothly revolving wheels. In that moment, I became 8 years old, and having just outwitted one of my smug older sisters, it was all I could do to keep from yammering like a monkey. Well, now, if we just keep at a thing, we'll get it to go in the end. Isn't that the truth? She cried, pleased with her stick-to-itiveness, which had borne practical fruit as well as an opportunity to express an eternal verity. Oh, I can tell we'll work well together. Right here, it's proved, and together we're a mechanical genius. We stationed ourselves, I in the chair where I had sat the day before, and Mrs. Oswald beneath Whistler's old lady. She picked up her microphone and spoke into it clearly. Because she never groped for a word, and because her undertones and overtones and rhythms altered at such cleverly strategic times, I, the only visible member of her audience, was caught up and indoctrinated even when I heard grumblings from the back of the house that her arguments were specious, her logic bizarre, and her deductions plucked from the foggy air. Now about Marina being a true or untrue picture, she said, stating the text for the day. Marina, as I have said, seems French to me. I have researched everything about Marina over and over. When she went to New Orleans, she did not want to live in an apartment with high ceilings. Now, where does she know about the high ceilings? There may be a simple answer for this and all the other things, but I don't have it, and I want it. And she complained about the cockroaches, which is all right, but a foreign girl knows how to clean up things. And then, of course, she knew a little French, too. Considering that she was French, the fact that she knew a little French, too, must have been useful. There's one little letter in the Warren report from Russia, from Lee, that said he married this girl, and she spoke a little French. Well, the letters had to be retyped because they didn't photograph well, and they omitted the word French. If you use a magnifying glass and look at Lee's letter, you will see that Marina speaks a little French. Now I ask myself, was this deliberate, or was this just an error? But when you find so many errors and in so much coincidence, then you begin to wonder if something's being whitewashed, and if there isn't something more to it than meets the eye. And Marina knew English. Marina and I conversed. I don't know Russian, and this is the part that I was indignant about, because after she went to live with Mr. Martin in his home, with his family, they put her on television, and that day she spoke real well broken English. If they said she didn't know English, that's baloney. She could understand, but when she went out any place, she didn't open her mouth and she made out she didn't speak or understand English. This is what I mean when I say she is not a true person. But why do you think she's French? I insisted, not at all satisfied with the proposition that an aversion to high ceilings and cockroaches was idiopathically Gallic. I wish I could go into this. I truly do. But it's just like, how do I love you? It's just something that doesn't make sense, you know? And you know it. I felt this almost when I first met her, and I saw that she didn't look Russian. She doesn't look Russian at all. I recalled that when I had seen the first photographs of Marina, I had been reminded of the flawed beauty of the girls in the Soviet films of a few years ago. The imperfections of skin and teeth of Veronica in The Cranes Are Flying had been inexplicably touching. Today, Oswald's widow is much different, cropped and kempt and styled, but at the time, no face had looked to me more Chekhovian or Dostoevskian or Pushkinesque. She could have been Lisa in peak dame, destined to hurl herself into the Neva as the sad snow fell around her, or Masha, of all three sisters, the one most given to tears. Mrs. Oswald, however, stated unequivocally she looks French, and that was that. Now, the only thing I'm sure of is that I had nothing to do with the assassination. I'm not sure about anybody else, and because I am looking for the truth, everyone is under suspicion in a way. You see, I don't know who's who. I have to evaluate everybody, and Marina doesn't ring true. Of course, I never hear anybody say she was French, but I have my reasons for saying this, which will be very delicate. She doesn't ring true to begin with in respect to motherhood, even if she thinks in her mind that Lee was guilty. The thing to do was protect him for her children's sake and for her sake. No, I'm not talking about lying because I don't believe in lying, but I mean to give out stories like if she had met him outside Russia, she would never have married him because of the type he was, and so on and so forth. That's just downing him more and more, and yet she's the mother of his children. This is not true of motherhood or womanhood. Even if he was a louse, she would defend him to a certain extent. She never goes out to the cemetery. She did in the very beginning. She went out and everything was fine. And then when she was taken over, she started changing. And whether it was for the security of the country, whether this was her role, whether she's being threatened, which is a possibility, whatever reason, it's not a nice reason. And this is why she is not a true person. First, she says, Lee, good man, Lee, no shoot anybody. And everything was in Lee's favor. And then all of a sudden, they get a hold of her and put her on television. And she says she thinks in her mind her husband is guilty. And from then on, her husband's a louse. These are the things that just don't jive. And now, another thing, all the witnesses told how she started complaining about everything as soon as she got here, how she treated him and how she talked about her sexual life and how she denounced him and so on and so forth, and taking up with these Russian people. This is all in black and white. I'm not imagining these things, and thank God there are other people taking this up. I say thank God because there are some people who would like to think that I have hallucinations. I know it's already been said in the Warren report. It was said by some attorney. Point blank, do you think your sister, they said this to my sister, do you think that your sister has hallucinations? Why? Because I noticed the inaccuracies and coincidences and things that don't jive. I know some people who wouldn't hesitate to make a mental case out of me. And believe me, if anybody's in their right mind, it's Mrs. Marguerite Oswald. She paused to let this sink in and take root. And as she did so, looked me in the eyes. No matter what Marina does, it's news. But locally, I can show reporters something in black and white, and they won't give me coverage. This is the difference. This is where the human element comes in. And this is where I have been persecuted and have suffered, just like my son. Oh, I can bear the ahs when they read this. Here is Ms. Oswald feeling sorry for herself. No, I'm not feeling sorry for myself. But I know for a fact that I have been persecuted. What's wrong with Ms. Oswald? Why does she think she's being persecuted? Is she mentally unbalanced? I've been asked that question publicly. No. Without persecution, there wouldn't be a persecution complex. This is what Freud said himself. Shut off your tape, dear heart. I did as I was told, anticipating a confidence too sensitive or hazardous to national security to be recorded. But all she said was, "Don't you think it's too hot for coffee today? Let me make you a glass of iced tea. I've got some nice Indian iced tea with a kind of spicy flavor." Today she was wearing a blue denim jumper and a perky red and white striped shirt, and she was shod in sneakers. She looked as carefree and fun-loving as the wife of the man in the ad who has retired to Florida at the age of 50 thanks to having taken the advice of his far-sighted insurance broker. I felt that she should have been telling me more about the iced tea, but even as she emptied ice trays clamorously and rattled spoons, she rode her tempest. Maybe you saw where Marina was offered $10,000 for the gun. The gun that killed President Kennedy and the telescope site that went with it, and the gun that killed Tippit. I said that I had been dumbfounded, as a matter of fact, that the weapons had not been acquired by the FBI or by the Smithsonian Institution, but I had been reminded that they belonged to the dead man's estate and were now Marina's to dispose of as she wished. The story I had read said that a private collector was negotiating for them, and at the time I had wondered what manner of man he could be. Well, now let me tell you about Marguerite Oswald being a mental case. When I read that, I said to myself, now those guns are worth a great deal more than $10,000, and Marina should get more money for my grandchildren. I am thinking about my grandchildren, so I called the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and told them what I thought. I said, those guns are priceless, but if they're going to be sold, let's see some justice done to the children of Lee Harvey Oswald. And just last week, there was an item in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that said a Frenchman had offered $20,000. Later on that evening, back in Dallas, a newspaper reporter told me that the second offer had been topped and that Marina had received $5,000 on account, and that $40,000 more was being held for her in escrow until the estate was settled. Since that time, the picture has changed altogether. So you see, I do my bit, but nobody knows, and it's a shame they don't. I'm not unhappy. You can see I'm not, can't you? But I'm a mother in history. I'm all over the world. There's 2 presidents in my life, and my son's the one accused. You know, here is Mrs. Kennedy, a very wealthy woman. Mrs. Tippit, a very wealthy woman. Marina, very wealthy. But I am wondering where my next meal is coming from. It's almost unbelievable. It's something almost like a spiritual. She brought me a dewy glass of tea with a spray of fresh mint. It was sugary and rather good, and it had no taste of tea. Here we are, we 4 women in history, and yet I am the mother. But has anyone come forward to reimburse me for my emotional stability? No. And I have given of time and of my voice, and yet I have $2,300 to my name. I'm not complaining. I have my health. I eat well. I'm not brooding. But isn't it strange? Now I made a television interview with Belly in Los Angeles, and we were so good they wouldn't stop the cameras, but wanted us to go on for an hour instead of the half hour. And I got $100 for that. Yet Richard Burton was on the same program the next night, and he got $5,000. What do you think he did with it? He gave it to charity. He is not even an American yet. He gave it to charity. And here is Mrs. Oswald, the mother, talking about the American way of life. And where's the rent money coming from? You understand I don't care about money. Money is only good to its use. But I need money to carry on the campaign against me. And as a mother, I think I deserve it. I got fired from my job as practical nurse because of the assassination. And it broke my heart. I didn't make only $5 a week, but I was glad to work for that because I was doing it for humanity. $5 a week, I asked, wondering what part of the century she had flashed back to. Sometimes 5, sometimes 25, 7 days a week, helping people. I was fired because of the assassinating, yet I was only the mother. 6 months later, when I went in the clothes locker, I saw my uniform and shoes and everything, and I just broke down. It just hit me hard, but now I have accepted this, and I feel like now I would never like to nurse again. I just don't feel like I would like to go into anybody else's sorrow. I have enough of my own. It's a hard life. Why, the very day of the assassination, I was nursing, and I heard it on the radio that my son, Lee Harvey Oswald, had been taken into custody. I came right home and called the Fort Worth Star-Telegram and asked them to send over a press car to take me to Dallas. You can push the button on again. We can drink our tea and talk at the same time. Is there anything you want to ask me? Yes, there is, I said. When did you last see Lee? I saw Lee in the jailhouse after the assassination, and he was all bruised up with black eyes, and I said, honey, did they beat you? And he said, it isn't anything, mother. I just got in a scuffle. Now, this is normal. He wouldn't tell his mother if he had been mistreated by the police, but I have my opinion. There's some kind of advertisement. The murder of JFK, so shocking, so unforgettable, examined in inquest. To understand the questions posed by Edward J. Epstein and his provocative analysis, you should be familiar with the two basic books on the assassination now in paperback, The Witnesses and Report of the Warren Commission. If you have not read these fascinating, comprehensive works, you should do so now while copies are still available. Only $1 each, and while those tragic events in Dallas are fresh in your memory. There it is. Report of the Warren Commission and The Witnesses. There's a coupon on the reverse side. Let's take a look at this. I almost wish this book was in bad shape so I could just flatten it out and read it, but as I've stated ad nauseum, I do not want to break the spine. There it is, the coupon. Quaint. But before the assassination, how long had it been since you'd seen him? I hadn't seen Lee since October, the end of October 1962, just about a year. That would make it. I used to do live-ins, and sometimes I'd be 200 miles away, but the truth is Lee and Marina left Fort Worth and didn't even tell me where they were. I called Robert, and he said Lee had a box number on him, and I told Robert to make sure he took care of his brother and so on. I was not in a position financially to help, working the way I was. And another thing, I was a little miffed. They left without telling me they were leaving. I was there that afternoon, and they left the next morning, and there's more to it than that. But never mind. And I thought, well, when they get good and ready, they'll come and see me. I hadn't seen John Edward for years before Robert either, and I felt, well, I'm their mother, and when they get ready, it's their place to come and see me. I don't worry about them anymore. And this was the attitude I took with Lee and Marina. They lived with me for a month, and then they moved out. I'm a working person. I have to pay my own rent, make my own living, and I don't have the money or time to run back and forth, and they didn't have a car to come over here. You understand? And two, I wouldn't have a place to put them up if they came to visit me. Maybe if I had a 3-bedroom house, maybe then they'd take the bus and come over for the weekend, but I never was in that position. I am entirely alone. I do not have even my children to discuss things with. For instance, Lee was left-handed, and right away I realized whoever shot the gun, it would make a difference. So I called Robert, and he wouldn't answer these important questions. I have suffered very much. Although Mrs. Oswald frequently made statements like this, designed to cause the blood of her interlocutor to run cold with embarrassment and to immobilize the tongue, such was the self-protecting and even complacent nature of her hostility to the world at large and to Washington in particular, that she did not urge, indeed she did not invite, one to enter her castle rack-rent, to view each tribulation separately. Rather, it was as if she had posted a notice on the door that read, Black Death or beware of the snakes, to indicate that inside there was mortification so monstrous and esoteric and ineradicable and paradoxically so precious that it could not be taken by any ordinary intelligence. I was guilty. I had contributed my galling bit to this treasure house of anguish and humiliation, but so had everybody else on earth. Serenely she spoke to the microphone, smiling now and then in composure as she talked, or as she tallied some of life's ironies, arching her dark eyebrows in astonishment at some of the most spiritual aspects of the case. You know, it's a strange thing, a very interesting thing, the way things have happened to me all my life. I said it sometimes like a spiritual, and I say it again. Now, ever since right before the Warren report came out, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram wrote they would not run a thing on the assassination. They had had a big dose of castor oil. I asked, why wasn't the Star-Telegram carrying any of my quotes? The Dallas reporters and everybody else was out at the cemetery for the year period. They wanted to hear from me, and I was on television and all, but there wasn't a thing said in the local paper about me being out at the cemetery for the year period. And of course, there were things said about the Tippets and the Kennedys. And I asked this young reporter, and he said, Ms. Oswald, they had a big dose here. But let's get back. Let's go back a little bit, and I'll give you an example of the way things have always worked against me. I will stop there since I'm about at the halfway point, and I can't finish it with my limited camera abilities, which are about 33 minutes. And this is about a 40-minute chapter or section, so I'll stop there. Goodbye, bruv. Good boy.